At the turn of the 20th century, large forest fires were a frequent occurrence in Vermont. At that time, there weren't many organized fire departments. Fires were often allowed to burn themselves out, or were put out by rain or snow. Logging and farming were the two most important occupations. Logging communities could be found throughout the Green Mountain Range, and forest land was being converted to pastures. Fires were intentionally set to clear the land. Railroads were useful for transportation and hauling timber, but were responsible for starting many forest fires. In the early 1900s, thousands of acres burned in Maidstone, Mendon, and a stretch of mountains near Manchester still known as the Burning. In 1904, after an unusually severe fire season, the Vermont legislature passed a law making the first selectman of every town responsible for suppressing forest fires. This was the beginning of the Vermont Forest Fire Warden program. Here is the story of Vermont's forest fire wardens as seen through the eyes of men and women who have served their communities as fire wardens and people who have worked with them as fire tower lookouts or state fire control staff. Fire wardens are appointed jointly by their town and the state. Some volunteered, others were drafted, and for many, the job was inherited.
Many situations where the old warden would retire or quit for some reason or another, and it was very difficult to get a new fire warden to take that warden's place. So a lot of hours were spent with the town officials, select board members and so forth, trying to find just the warden we wanted.
I was tapping one spring, Johnny Barrels come over and found out sugar lights. Asked me if I'd do it. We'd always been kind of involved in it anyways.
Well, I used to be quite a hunter. I used to hunt everywhere. And the whole town I knew it. So I had a great friend of mine on the site board. And he come along to me one day and he says, "We'd like to have you fire warden." Ah, I don't know about that. But anyway, I said, well, I'll try it. So I did, and I've been there ever since.
Well, my father was fire warden. He was in 20-some years. He was in from the late mid-40s somewhere up till he died in 61. And then they asked me if I would be interested in doing it. Since I had some experience with pack pumps, I thought it'd be a good idea.
Well, I think it kind of got handed down to me when my father stepped down as chief and I got elected as chief. It just kind of, the baton just passed over to me.
First of all, my father was a warden, and then after a while.
To start off with, my dad was a fire warden.
My father was fire warden for about 20, I'm not sure exact years, I think it's about 20, before I was, and I wrote the permits for him.
Well, my dad years ago when I was a kid, he was a fire warden.
I see.
And he moved away and they had to have somebody else and they elected me up to town meeting.
What does a forest fire warden do?
Well, I look at it, it is not only issuing burning permits and things like that, but keeping track of the forest, the condition of the forest and stuff within the town, any water supplies that I might have to have or use during the summertime.
Well, I gotta make darn sure nobody starts the fire unless they get a permit.
Making sure they're burning clean, natural brush and that they're burning in a safe area, non-windy days.
It's still pretty much the same. If you see a fire, you gotta put it out.
Fire prevention is an important part of the job. The #1 cause of forest fires in Vermont is debris burning, whether it's burning brush from construction sites or clearing overgrown fields. To make sure burning is done safely, state law requires a permit from the town fire warden. Wardens can delegate this responsibility. In most towns, a permit is not required if there's snow on the site. And it's never legal to burn anything but brush, weeds, or grass, even in a burn barrel. Of course, there will always be a few people who don't think the law applies to them. So, how do fire wardens decide whether it's safe to issue a burning permit?
Anybody that asks me at the house here for a burning permit, I usually go to see what the heck is they gonna do, what they're gonna burn to start with.
Well, most everybody either calls me or want to know what the rights are about getting a burning permit. And those that I'm wondering about, I go take a look at the situation before I give them a burning permit. So I think that saved a lot of forest fires.
Well, I kind of keep track of the river, and when she's getting down, I shut the permits off. It seems to work out very well for us.
If it's raining and snow on the ground, I tell them they don't have to have permit on the snow on the ground. And then if it's too windy, I said it's pretty darn windy today. You better wait a few days.
Weather conditions weren't right for burning. So I wouldn't let the Queen of England burn.
Averil's pretty remote for me, so I got a deputy up at Averill. Priscilla Roy is my deputy at Averill, and she does what Helen does here. She writes out permits.
Now, your wife issues burning permits
She
too.
issues a lot more than I do.
Either I write them or the wife writes them down at the office.
Yeah, my wife probably writes as many as I do.
Marge issues probably as many as you do,
If not more.
if not more.
Yeah, we sometimes talk about the weather at breakfast and that, and then that's the way it is. She can say no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They don't argue with her as much as they do me when she says no.
It says, unless it's raining or snowing, no permits. Well, Christy looked out and there's one snowflake come floating down. Hey, it's snowing! And I looked and want Crystal and another friend. Hey, you're right. I said, when I get to Kel's Mills, I'll shut down my pump and I'll go up and get the permit.
Then another thing that we run into a lot is people, that get blown in the spring of the year and snow get pretty well gone.
Yeah.
Oh, there's still snow on the ground I can burn.
Yeah.
I've had several of them tell me, oh, we got adequate snow. And I said, where?
The surface was pretty well dried out, leaves were dry. So I was telling him that, and he said, well, my spot's still got snow on it. I said, yeah. He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm getting finished up with chores. In a little bit, I'll come up and check it out. He said, okay, I'll see you in a little bit. So he left. Just about time I was getting finished up with chores, he come back in the barn and says, well, snow's all melted. I guess I'll wait.
You can't always believe what they tell you. Sometimes they'll give you quite a story. And then it's altogether different when you get there.
I asked him what would he like to burn. He said, well, that brush pile right there. Well, there was no brush pile. And I said, well, show me a brush pile. And I said, I'll issue a burn permit. But I said, I want to see it. Well, I don't have them all done yet, but I will. So he took me over to another small brush pile. I said, well, that's really not brush. And I said, what's that one over in the back corner? He goes, oh, there's my brush pile. So we walked over through the woods to look at the brush pile, and there was brush on the top of it. But the interesting part was there was a mobile home underneath there that he wanted to burn also. And he said he's been doing that for 30 years, burning that kind of stuff. And he got mad at me because I wouldn't issue a burn permit.
We used to have one guy that come from Canada, and I think that was the first year I was on, and he built fires continuously. His children would call, or his wife would call when he headed for the woods, because she knew that we were going to have a fire.
I had one woman just a couple of years ago. She was burning, no permit, nothing. So her neighbors complained. I went over and I asked her to see her fire permit because, well, she says in Irisburg there's no zoning, so I don't need a fire permit. So I said, hey, I've been a selectman 48 years, and I'm probably the most responsible of anybody that we don't have zoning. But I said, that's got nothing to do with your fire. Well, it's just over across the valley. There's some smoke coming up. Somebody else burning it. Yeah, they've got a permit.
People have gotten a lot better about calling you up, letting you know. I have a young couple that has bought a piece of property in town, and they will call me from down in Connecticut when they're going to be up.
They have had this out long enough so that they know now that they have to have permits. And it's not only this down here, they come from Massachusetts, Connecticut.
I hate to tell somebody no
Right.
when they're trying to get a job done.
Public relations is a pretty big part of it.
Right.
Use people right. they use you right.
And word gets around when you can help a guy out.
Fortunately, most people follow the rules. Fire wardens can issue a ticket to people who break forest fire laws.
When I first took over, I had one guy that he thought he could burn anytime he wanted, when he wanted.
Sure.
When they issued them ticket books,
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
that was a lever.
And you meet some guys try to pull the wool over your eyes, you know, well, I ain't gonna bother to get a burning permit, but I am gonna burn as well. I got a book of tickets that I hate to use, but I'll use one if you start a fire without a permit. And I said, don't you burn again without a permit, because I've got a book of tickets here and I'll be able to see it. Well, she come and got a permit after that.
People burning to dispose of brush, grass, or other debris have caused some memorable wildfires. Some of these fires started from burn barrels. Some people even had burning permits, and still their fires got away. And a few people had interesting excuses for causing a wildfire.
I had a guy with a burning barrel up here in back, and I said, how'd the fire get started? Well, I had that, put some stuff in that burning barrel. I said, don't tell me about a burning barrel, you got no right to have one of those anyway. Well, now, wait a minute now. Everybody has one. I said, no, you're not supposed to burn it. Well, he said, they got horsing around, the kids did, and tipped it over. And they said, got into the grass, and it had quite a fire.
Somebody was burning in a barrel wallpaper, another paper, and it flew out and caught the grass fire. And this was a case where it burned down into the swamp and headed towards a wooded area where there were houses.
And here he is, he's got, I forget now whether 8 or 9 fire departments called in, because what had happened, the lady had been burning in an illegal burn barrel, and it had gotten out, and they had it all knocked down pretty much. And then all of a sudden it blew up on the side hill, probably 150 yards from where they were.
I was still puttering around down there, looking things over, one thing and another, trying to see if I could prove it.
Yeah.
And this little girl came out and she says, can I help you? And I says, no, I guess not. I says, I'm just looking at the fire here. I says, wondering how it got started. And she says, well, we burned our rubbish.
One other time, when they had a permit to burn over some meadowland, my neighbor next door to me. And so he started it, and I went up to see how things were going, and one of the other neighbors came up, and we stood there visiting. The fire comes along, goes up on the stone wall, runs up this tree of grapevines, and he runs around behind it, and we stood there, the other neighbor and I stood there visiting, and pretty quick, we didn't pay much attention, he comes running back down, he said, I can't stop it. It was headed right up across the pasture, headed right to the mountain. So we put out a call for help, and when they came from Wallingford, and we had several companies there, but Wallingford was the main one. When they came over the mountain, they saw it going up the mountain. They said, we're never going to stop that. So consequently, we did get it stopped, and it stopped right at the hardwood line. It did a nice job. It killed all the brush, and really couldn't have done a better job if we planned it.
We had a fella who was in his 70s, had this problem. He had a maple tree that was probably the size of this table. And there was a hedgehog living in it. And the hedgehog kept on climbing up to his house, and chewing on his house, and he got sick of it. So he said, oh, I'll fix this one. So he decided he'd smoke it out. Well, what do you suppose that maple tree was like inside there that was that big around? It was hollow. Hollow and nothing but dry cinders. Well, it turned into cinders. Because that thing caught fire. And it was probably about 20 feet tall. And what do you suppose happened? That thing caught on fire. I don't know whether the hedgehog ever made it out or not.
Somebody called me up on a Sunday afternoon, wanted a fire permit. And I refused it. I said, no. I said, the guys about got there. This was in the summer, right? Early spring, early summer, just when it was good going, for a fire. And I said, no. I said, the boys are probably all out there with their shorts on out and back having cocktails and stuff, and I don't think they feel like being called out in an evening on a Sunday. I'm a son of a gun, it wanted half an hour.
Yeah.
I happened to look down that way, and I looked like somebody was boiling sap down there.
Yes.
So I went down, and sure enough, the damn fool had gone out there and set fire in the grass, and it almost got away. Boys, I called the boys all out, and they done a good job. They got it down. But his excuse was, why he done it, was that his daughter had been out there playing with, I don't know whether her husband or boy, or what.
Yeah.
Anyway, she lost her ring out there in the winter in the snow. And he didn't know, but if he burnt the grass over, he could find the ring.
Did you start this fire? Yes, Morris says I started it, and he said, but he said, I figured I had help enough there. He said it just got away from us. That's all there was to it. And all I said, well, who'd you have for help? Well, he said I had my boys. Well, I saw, when I drove in the yard, I saw some little kids, you know, running around there. And I says, well, how many boys? Well, he said my boys. He said they're right in the yard now. I said, you mean those little kids that are running around? And Morris at that time was probably a guy that was at least 50 years old, and his wife was about 19 or 20. And anyway, they had 3 or 4 boys. And I said, you mean those little kids are the ones that was watching the fire? And yeah, Morris said, but he said they're usually pretty good boys, but he said some reason he said the fire got away from them.
So I said to him, Gil, you ought not be doing this without a permit. Oh, no problem, no problem. I can handle it. We got a couple pails of water here. And about that time the wind come up and it was gone. And I mean it was gone. Had it not been for the road, we brought branches off of softwood trees and flogged it with that, and they were running back and forth with pails of water. And Hollis, when we got all done, got it all hammered out and everything, Hollis said, that's the reason for permits.
When there's a forest fire in town, the fire warden is responsible for any suppression activities. Who does the firefighting? And how has that changed over the years?
It used to be like the people that worked in town, but now there's not that many actually that work in town, so usually it's you rely on mutual aid, the fire department, and then just they call mutual aid.
And same thing there, but you don't have as many, we have the road crew. And
Yeah, we always get the road crew.
Same thing, and there's a few people, farmers that are around, but most of the people in the department are out of town.
The town fire warden would count on a mill or count on a factory
For his crew.
for his crews and so forth. And a lot of them working outside of the state and so forth, took them a long time to get there. So the farmers in the area, well, everybody thought it may be my land that's going to burn next. And so they were always willing to help the fire warden.
We had one a few years ago, just a grass fire, it burnt like 45 acres in about 45 minutes. But if it wasn't for mutual aid, it'd probably still be burning.
2 or 3 lightning strikes up here. We had to come over and help. We have to come help people occasionally.
I see. They were in Scotland.
Yeah.
Had to come from your town to do it, right?
Yeah. I had to help them put it in.
You ever go over to West Windsor firefighting?
Yes.
They're always there. And they're nice young fellows that carry pipe pumps today too.
And back then, in order to get a crew together, you had to get on the phone and call everybody. And that sure was time consuming. When we had an operator would just get on the phone and make one long ring and everybody pick up and you know what to do.
Just a few of them had red phones, and they'd call 5, 6 people, and somebody else over here had another red phone, they called, so that's the way we notified them.
Fighting fires in remote areas can be tough. New fire suppression equipment has helped. You don't always need water, but when you do, sometimes you have to improvise to get water to the top of a mountain. Often, Mother Nature lends a hand, but a backpack pump full of water still weighs 50 pounds.
I had caches.
Yeah.
And they'd have an axe, they'd have Of course, there was always 3, 4, 4, 5 of those pack pumps that went with them too. And then they'd have this, I always called it a spade. It's like a big axe.
At that time, we didn't have the tools that we had today. We didn't have the tools for driving it, water and stuff right into the ground and boring right down in, so that we had to dig it all out with axes and mattocks and stuff.
Your pack pumps you almost have to have, because there's a lot of places in this town you can't get there unless you have pack pumps.
I called Dave Spaulding that day, was fire warden in Canaan, and I called him, and put the fire out, and they done it all with pack bags. Them little pack pumps, they done it all with that, and it was a big field fire.
It got so the water just wasn't getting up there, because with the 5 gallons on their back, they were stopping and leaning against a tree and so forth. Well, once I realized what was happening from the reports coming back down, there was a young lady from South Carolina that was hiking in the area, and she wanted to help. And so I took a pack pump and put just enough water in the bottom of it so it would slop and they could hear the water in there. And I told her that her job was to go right up the side where the path was going to the top, going up and then coming right back down, and going up and coming right back down. But it was basically an empty tank. Well, as she was going up through there, all these firefighters that were leaning up against the tree would see this young lady going right up through with a backpack on and so forth. You'd be surprised how much water we got there.
And I've heard my Uncle Burton Hill tell about, he had a team of horses and he did a lot of sugaring, and he had a gathering tub and they had him hauling water up to the top of the mountain with the horses and gathering tub.
The equipment when Dad was back, all we had for a fire truck was a log truck with a tank on it, a holding tank. I don't remember what it didn't hold much.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a portable pump that they stuck in a brook somewhere to fill it. And that was the fire equipment.
I got a tank in the back of it, and our first portable pump, which we bought in 1956, that's in the back of it right now.
But we lucked out on that one because he was right there with the skidder, and then brought over South Dairy had one of them, what they call them, buffalo tanks?
Yeah, yeah.
We filled that right out of the river, and then he hooked her onto it and took her up top the mountain so we could get the water downhill, not up.
We ended up with a relay system of 5 different pumps to get the water up to where the fire was.
It has changed over the years. We've seen the induction of foam into our firefighting.
And we logged tank after tank after tank of water up there. And we would think we would get it, and in a couple days it would break out again. And finally, the only way that we got it out was that the manager agreed to charge us lift lines, or charge us not as lift lines, but as
Snowmaking lines.
Snowmaking lines. And we got the fire out with water that they pumped from the pond for snowmaking.
So I hot-footed it right up through and hit the Route 4, I guess it is,
Yeah.
and went
Yeah.
back. And I got back there, and of course the smoke was boiling out. And I hot-footed it up on the ridge, and it got up there. And they says, "You bring any water with you?" And I says, "You don't see any hanging off me?" My tongue was hanging right out, you know. My Lord, it was steep. And he says, we're almost out of water. And I says, "Good Lord Almighty, we can't lose it now."
Yeah.
And because this fire goes right straight through what they used to call the Pittsfield Chattagay.
Oh, sure.
Through there. You know where that is.
Oh, yes, I know where it is.
Well, sure, that's where I was headed for. And boy, I said, that's a lot of forest up through there.
Yeah.
So I was kind of scratching my head, what in the devil can I do? There's no brooks there, no nothing there to get at, you know.
Yeah.
And I heard a tractor. And I looked, and here was this tractor down on the farm. And I hot-footed it right straight down to the farm. When I got down there, and by the time I got there, he was just getting ready to pull up and unhook his trailer.
Yeah.
And I says, "Can you help me?" And he says, well, if I can. He says, "That's quite a fire you got going up there." And I said, "Well, I guess it is." And so he says, I said, but I need some water. He hadn't even unhooked. He had a 250-gallon tank on the back with sap in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And he says, boy, Shingles, he says, we don't need the water. I'm all hooked up here. And he says, well, get right on here. And I got on his tractor and away we went. We went clear to the top of that mountain and we filled them pack pumps right up full of water, of sap, and it worked. It worked.
That's good.
We caught the fire and we didn't lose it and we mopped it up and he says, I didn't want to do any more sugar in anyway, he says.
Fortunately, Mother Nature smiled on us that night and she just cut it loose and let it rain. And it rained for about 3.5 hours.
I think that fire must have reignited and Mother Nature put it out for us again.
Some of the largest fires in Vermont have occurred in the spring, before the leaves are out to shade the forest floor. If the weather's dry and it's a windy day, a fire can spread quickly. There have been days like that when memorable fires have occurred. Mother's Day 1975 in Island Pond was one of those days. On April 19, 1976, there were several fires, including one at Stratton Pond and another on Mother Myrick Mountain near Manchester. But the biggest fire in memory was the Hawks Mountain Fire, which started in Cavendish and burned 672 acres in May 1957.
One Mother's Day, we had a whole string of them all around the upper end of Northeast Kingdom. It burnt up in Island Pond. It blew over and killed a whole bunch of deer. Never burned a hair on them. And I don't mind telling them, I said, this is what can happen if that fire crowns. It'll sweep over the top of you, it won't touch you, but it'll take all the oxygen off the ground, you're dead.
It was very interesting watching the Stratton Pond fire because it was right underneath
Oh,
it.
sure.
And you could actually
Yeah.
see, once they got in there, you could actually see the fire rolling back.
Yep.
Everybody with hand pumps.
They were just
and,
there with hand pumps, right.
It was amazing because it was starting to come up the mountain.
Stratton Pond one was the same year as Mother Mary.
Mother Meyer, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, they were right together. I mean, they were both burning the same day.
I think the biggest one in that neck of the woods was the Mother Myrick fire.
Right.
It was awesome. I think it was about 250 acres.
Yeah.
And,
With the, I guess, a crown fire. That was a big
and
one. That
we stayed up all night long in the tower taking turns for callbacks from Junior was on the scene there to making sure it was suppressed.
They were cleaning the camp out, and the
Yeah.
place where there was going to be for the summer, and blah, 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 blah. They took the stuff out and touched it off, and that's where it started.
Yeah.
It started, it split, it jumped the brook, and it
Yeah.
started the other ways. I says to the mass shoots or the tunnel to the Sandgate boys, I said, will you take care of what's on the other side of the brook, and we'll take care of this.
Yeah.
And they said,
Yeah.
because that was the steep part. That fire was the very first fire that I ever saw jump from evergreen to another spot, to another spot, to another spot. And I saw that right up in an aircraft. I was flying it to see what was going on.
I was to Cavendish to work up there in Woolen Mill. They said there was a fire up there, and I called home to ask her if she could see any signs of it. No, she couldn't.
Yeah.
But by and by she called back and said, yeah, come up right over here.
So I went, when we flew back around, and I said to him, I said, before you land, I says, can you talk to Boston? And he says, yes. I says, call him and ask him what the weather's going to be tonight and tomorrow. And he come back on, he says, I don't know whether you like this or not, but he says, it's going to be windy tonight, and tomorrow it's going to shift. I says, what direction is it going to shift in? And he told me the directions it was going to shift in, and I says, boy, am I glad we called them up. Because I said, if they're on the money, I said, that wind, as it was now, it was burning towards the town, but it was burning downhill, which is a lot slower. And but I said, we'll be ready for it when it comes. So I had a crew come in, and I had come in at 6 o'clock, and took them right up on the mountain, and told them exactly what to do. I said, this may look foolish, there's no fire here at all, but I want you to put a fire line in from here over towards where the swamp is. And by golly, they did. They got it ready. And then it was still, and I was waiting because the old, I can't remember what his name was, but the old fire chief there in Springfield, real nice old man, he says, "You made a foolish move." I says, "Well, if I did, I'm the one that's going to have to take it." And he said, "That fire's going to burn that community right out up there." And I says, "I don't think so." So I was watching the clock, and it got along about 8 o'clock, and sure enough, you could see the wind beginning to twitch a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it got through, it was humming, I'll tell you. But it came down through to where the boys had put the fire line in, and it held. I learned quite a lot about birds and the bees that I didn't know before.
Sure.
And here this old hen partridge, and come to find out, all the hen partridges that were there, they were sitting on their eggs.
Yeah.
And they sat there and died. They would not leave the nest.
Yeah,
They wouldn't
isn't that
leave the
something?
nest.
Ah.
And I thought that was something. And then there were deer that came through, right on a dead run, and we'd be this close, putting the fire line in.
Yeah.
And they'd run right between the two people.
Ah,
It
yes.
didn't bother them a particle. One thing that came through, and I felt real sorry for it, it was right, kind of making a funny noise, but it was a bobcat, and his fur was smoking.
Ah,
It
yes.
was actually smoking.
I'll be darned.
And there was another one, and I saw this, so I can verify it. There was a bear that was burnt so bad that came down off the mountain, jumped in the Black River, which runs right down through there,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
they're drowned right there.
Well, there was several days that we were in and around with our fire pumps and put out burning stumps.
Sometimes fires aren't large, but burn deep in the ground and can be tough to put out.
I learned then, if a fire gets into ground, it's almost impossible to put it out. It gets to burning in some old ruts and logs, and you wet it over and underside is dry, and pretty soon it's burning.
You get umpteen acres over there, and that thing burnt for 3 weeks. We'd go up there, we had it all out, and my key man, we'd go up there and we'd walk right along, and all of a sudden you drop right into the ground.
We had it all out Saturday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We'd gain on it a little at night because of it. They was burning underground. There was a lightning strike, and the wind took the tree. It hit a tree and tipped over the wind. Didn't finish burning the original tree. And the fire warden, Hugh Roberts, at the time came over, and we went over there 25 days later, and there was still one spot burning underground.
Some fires are memorable for other reasons.
I don't know how many wardens have had this happen, but the first fire that I had as a fire warden, it was a brush fire in the spring of the year. It was just a little small backyard fire, but I had to, after I got home, I had to hurry up and get cleaned up to go to a senior prom with my girlfriend, who ended up being my wife.
Yeah.
So that was kind of unusual for a fire warden to have to get home to go to a senior prom.
He was getting ready to take his wife to over to Salem.
Yeah.
He says, "You sit right there in the car." The guys begin to roll right in. He took them up and he told them what they wanted for a fire lane around the fire and the whole 10 yards. Then he hot-footed it right back down and got in his car, and he took his wife to Salem. And they got over to Salem, and they just about got through in the hospital doors when she had a baby boy.
The town forest fire warden is jointly appointed by the select board and the state. Staff from Vermont's forestry department coordinates the forest fire warden program. They're also available to provide assistance with fire suppression, weather information, equipment, and training.
About every 10 years or so, we seem to have a lightning fire or something, that gets into problems, Well, like this last year, we brought hose and pumps over.
When I retired, there was still some towns, the only tanker they had was a excess property tanker. A program here in the state where the federal government, we would pick up GSA equipment and loan to them a tanker and so forth, or a 3/4 ton military vehicle just to carry their fire tools back in for them. And so this is how a lot of the fire departments started out.
The last fire lookout towers were retired in the early 1980s. Most fires are reported by the public, and small planes are now used to detect fires when the fire danger is high. At one time, however, Vermont had a large network of forest fire towers.
The main purpose for being in a fire tower on a mountain on duty at fire watch is to spot smoke and report that smoke.
Now, as far as getting up to these towers, was there a road? Did you drive up there, or how did you get up there?
No, Shanks man. The only time you step down was when you get out of your vehicle.
Joe was a real old country boy, and I mean, he was a country boy. And he said to me, a ripping good lookout. He said, "You care if I have a horse up there?" And I says, "No." He says, "I'm getting kind of old, lug all that stuff up on my back, you know." And I says, "Yes, you are, Joe." He says, "But I'll get one." And so he got a horse, and he come in when he come home from work. Now this is not working for me. He'd go down, this was work for him. He'd go down and get his groceries, and he'd get this, and he'd get that, whatever he had to have. So I says, "How are you going to get that back up?" Well, he remedied that in a hurry. He got some bags so he could put his groceries in it. He balanced them up over the horse's back, and he grabbed right a hold of the horse's tail, and he says, "Let's go to the top." That doggone horse would go with him, you know, just as slow and easy, and he'd stagger along behind him, and he pulled him all the way up the mountain. And that's the gospel truth.
Setting up there in that fire tower, you can see a lot of territory. A lot of territory. And that West Pond Mountain you can see forever. Monadnock you can see further than that.
Once you spot one of those smokes, you have an instrument in the tower called an alidade, which is on a map, a huge round table. There's a map. And you spin that alidade around, you use it like a rifle sight. You sight the smoke, you spot the smoke, you sight it in, and you locate that spot on the map. And what you do is you contact the ranger in that particular district where you've spotted the smoke.
They just wanted you to be as accurate as possible about where you thought you saw something, and a lot of times they knew whether something was already burning.
We use Croydon Tower. Croydon Tower helps us. A couple times a year they'll spot fires and get on our frequencies and tell us and ask us if they have no permits in the area, and they pinpoint the smoke pretty much right to the area.
In here, but they couldn't look over the mountain to
pinpoint it.
Pinpoint it. And one time somebody was spreading line.
He called me up, they said there's a big fire down there. Down I go. They were spreading line.
One time there, I had both Killington and Black Mountain caught on fire, and they were within probably 100 yards of where the fire was, where they had spotted it, and it turned out there was nice dry line.
You'd call the warden, you'd say something, you'd see smoke, and of course they would go and surprise somebody burning illegally, of course.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
I think
Sure.
the humor used to be,
Oh, yeah.
who they were catching down below, and who could have seen them,
Right.
Who on earth would be peering into their backyard.
And a lot of these rangers have been around for many, many years doing this job, and they never panic.
I would call Melbourne on a suspicious fire in this neck of the woods, and a couple of days later he'd tell me it was okay. It seemed that they all had their own private routes that they could get a nice look at, kind of focus in on where I was seeing it.
A lot of times I'll get a call on smoke.
Yeah.
And I'll run up on Taylor Hill. If I can't spot it from there, then I'll go over to Bromley.
Yeah.
And see if I can see it from
Sure.
there.
Well,
And generally between them 2 points, if
Yeah.
there is anything, you can spot it.
If there's any smoke that maybe somebody can't see from down in the valley somewhere, they always know a vantage point somewhere in that town that they can go and pinpoint this smoke. And a lot of the older fire wardens, although they're not that active, are still real benefit to the state. They almost act like little fire towers.
Forest fire wardens are people who believe in serving their towns. They never seem to go off duty. Forest fire wardens even get a paycheck from the state.
I've worked for the department almost 33 years, and it was $20 a year when I started, and it's still $20 a year.
Yeah, and I just got my check last week.
Yeah.
It's $20.
Now, is this a heavy paid job?
I ain't got to work anymore this year. I just got that just in the mail.
Oh, and how much is it?
$20.
Hey!
That's a year's wages.
When my check comes in, Bob says, "Oh, we can go out to dinner tonight."
The wages they've been paying me have helped us considerable. We really only have to, my wife and I only have to work half time.
What do you think of the pay that we give you? More than adequate, or?
Oh, come on.
There's really no way of saying whether or not you're getting adequately compensated for doing the job that we do. If I was in it for the money, I'd say no.
I got a nice sign on the front of my truck, and people know me when they meet me on the road.
Well, if I paint it, they'll raise my taxes.
Most all the fire wardens that I had, and most all the fire wardens today, if they're a fire warden, it seems though they're a fire warden forever. Nobody ever gets done.
One time went through the town report, and of course people say, how can you do it? But I have given the town of Barnet over 100 years.
There's no great glory or prestige in it, if you will, but it's a job that needs doing.
Gotta have an understanding wife sometimes.
I enjoy the job, I enjoy the people that I meet along the way.
Yeah, you meet a lot of nice people.
Yeah.
You meet a few that ain't quite so nice.
You meet a lot of nice people.
Well, I always enjoyed the fire part. I enjoyed working with the fire wardens.